This year's criminology report really tried to focus in on what is changing and why is it changing. Not necessarily looking at growth in and of itself. Not just saying, malware grew 647% from 2007 to 2008, but really looking at what's driving the changes and what do we think is going to be important going forward. So probably the key thing that was identified was the economic downturn and how the economy is going to factor into cybercrime going forward. That's probably the biggest takeaway. And off of that is, it's going to affect it most likely in two ways. Is the amount of malware will certainly grow because it's all written to make money in this day and age, quite honestly. And how it's used in messaging and as a lure will certainly also have a big effect over the coming year, because this year we saw more and more news used immediately in malware. As soon as economic downturns and mergers and acquisitions were announced, later that same day we would actually see that reflected in the scams and the spams and the malware of the same day. And that was really a big change, because up until then it was, buy this stock, go to this e-pharmacy, get this product for less money. But immediately, they really started leveraging the fear of the consumer and the fear of the banking customer as a way to steal identity information. So those are probably the two biggest things that the report concentrates on. More web-based malware than ever before. It really is the time to be a Web 2.0 world for malware. I think we'll still see numerically a percentage of malware that still goes through email because it's successful. They may change, it may just be linkage or something like that, but there's such a large volume of it that goes through email that is the 1% stuff. If 1% of the 10 million spams are clicked, then you got a certain amount of success. But it's really going to be a Web 2.0 world. Websites that have code inserted into them that are used to distribute malware either directly through drive-bys or that are used to divert traffic to a website in a different part of the world that then installs malware. It's going to be a very Web 2.0 world. It's all going to be server-driven pretty much by the end of 2009, meaning when you go to the website is packaging up a piece of unique malware specifically for you. So that's certainly going to be a big deal, and it's called server-side polymorphism. Ridiculously complex term, but it just means you're getting one that's built for you. And then once again, leveraging more news and more of the economic climate than ever before. And then some of the same stuff like more stealth, more hiding, things like that. But I would say the two big things for people to be aware of is very much a Web 2.0 world. A lot of the sites they go to either being victimized and then used against them, like Facebook would be a very good example, that had a worm just recently. Actually, the McAfee Avert Labs was the first to identify. It's called CoopFace. It was a CoopFace variant, but this particular variant we identified. And it's an interesting piece of malware because it installs itself on the victim machine, and then when the victim logs into their Facebook account, it then goes through the victim's Facebook friend list and sends links out to everybody in your friend list with a link that says, hey, I saw you in a video, click here to see it. So you're actually getting a piece of messaging that you'll trust. And that is exploiting the trust model in a very unique way. It's a little bit old school kind of mass mailer-ish in kind of the way it does it, uses your own friend list against your friends. So those kinds of things will certainly be more commonplace, and really anything that's a high traffic site is really looked to be used against users in this day and age. Some people are very ready for it. Some businesses have a lot of organizational structures in place to deal with. Some organizations do. Some federal bureaus are actually quite adept at identifying web threats and everything else. Some of the others are completely ill-prepared for it. They just don't know what to do with it. And the problem also is that they don't communicate enough with each other. You have ISPs, which are really the gatekeepers of a lot of stuff. All the mail flows through, all the traffic flows through them. And we all have to do a better job of vendors communicating with other vendors communicating with ISPs and vendors communicating better, all of us communicating with government to really embrace a bigger picture, because none of us can really combat it or manage it alone, but together we can actually take down the Macolos of the world, which is another real good example of a success. Macolo taken offline, and literally 70% of spam went away for a very short period of time. Granted, some of them will transfer over to other services to get their spam and their threats and their spams back up again. But it's a good example of the good things that happen when we all work together toward the bigger picture. So I think therein lies our long-term success, is breaking down silos. See, I think some of the malware may stay very much the same. It may become more stealthful, but it's still going to be looking for the same types of information, identity information, whether it's password combinations and username combinations or banking data or credit card information. It's still going to be looking for the same types of data. It'll certainly become more stealthful. It'll certainly become more web-based and those things. But you make a good point in that, when people are worried about, where their next paycheck is coming from and, I have bills to pay and I need to pay those bills, they're going to be looking to the internet as ways to supplement their income. So we've already seen a rise in those kinds of fake job sites, quite frankly. And it looks like a legitimate job site. But it really turns out to be the front for a money laundering organization. They're telling you you're becoming an internet financial transactions specialist or some dopey terminology like that. But you're actually what you really are is accepting anonymous transactions and then sending out a cashier's check or a money order to a third party. Classic money laundering. And I think people in an environment where they're worried about their next paycheck are going to be drawn into 30% cuts of that. Make money fast. So, we're already starting to see a rise in it, and I think it'll probably be very successful for them in 2009. Well, number one, they have to stop de-emphasizing it. And in this day and age, they're really focusing on the economy, completely understandable. They're really focusing on terrorism, really completely understandable. But there's, in many cases, a de-emphasis on cybercrime. And we talk a lot about that in the Virtual Criminology Report. And it's not like it was tough to be a cyber criminal before. It's always been the fact that they've been able to hide easily and send malware out from different parts of the world. So it's not like they didn't have it easy before, but when you continually de-emphasize it, and then you combine that with a lack of skilled people, a judicial system that may not have appropriate laws on the books for prosecuting them, you really end up having an environment that is conducive to being a cyber criminal. But with the administration that's coming in, they're a bit more technically astute and a bit more internet enabled than in administrations past. So I think there's some promise in there. There's been rumors that President-elect Obama will install a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. So things like that I think are promising. But one thing they just really need to work on is global, breaking down silos, better communication, even umbrella organizations that have the ability for us to all work together. So instead of just this organization and that organization, some type of umbrella organization that has the ability to coordinate action between governments and ISPs and stuff like that. Because once again, it's a global problem, and unless we embrace that, we got problems.